Hey everyone, this is Akenya, the Empress of Double Venus Astrology, and I'm here today to talk about the solar eclipse, the thing that everybody is talking about, the total solar eclipse, and why this event is so important, why it is going to be so impactful, the ways in which it's impactful, and I'll mainly be talking about the eclipse that we're having on the 8th, but I'm also going to give a little bit of backstory about eclipses in general, what they are, how they work, some of the lore behind them, some of the ancient mythos around eclipses, and also talk a bit about the nodes because we really should understand them or should try to understand them a little bit better than I think we tend to in the West. The East, the Vedic um, systems tend to have a really good handle and understanding on what the nodes actually are and how they actually work. And so I'm going to break all of that down. This is going to be a bit of a deep dive. So let's get started. Okay, so let's just take a little look at this to break down kind of the mechanics of eclipses and how they work. So first of all, we need to understand the nodes, the lunar nodes, because the nodes are a calculated point, and technically, other planets have nodes, but the nodes of the moon are of particular importance for a few reasons. So um, you'll notice that here we have an image of Earth, and this is the ecliptic, right? So this is like the apparent path of the sun, right? How we're going to see that, right? And the points where the moon intercepts the ecliptic are those nodal points. So we'll see. So this would be longitude, of course, this will be latitude. So here where there's that interception, we see when the the longitude is decreasing, we're going to have the south node, right? And when it's increasing or ascending, we're going to have the north node. Um, so that's just what the nodes are. They're not a planet, they're calculated points that have to do with this particular interception. And the reason why eclipses are possible, so anytime there's an eclipse, the sun and the moon are going to be conjunct one of or both of these nodes. So if it's a full moon eclipse, sun is going to be on one, moon is going to be on the other, and it can be either, although typically full moon eclipses are more traditionally associated with the moon being conjunct Rahu or the north node. Um, but in either we would call it an eclipse, right? And then obviously if it's a solar eclipse, the sun and the moon are conjunct, and that can be happening on the south or the north node. It happens to be happening on the north node for this one. So the reason a total solar eclipse is possible is because of this kind of beautiful, mathematic synchronicity or sacred geometry that we observe. So the sun is like uh, 400 times the size of the moon, right? But the sun is also 400 times like further away than the moon is, right? So when we look at them in the sky, because of the distance and the size, they appear to be basically the same size, which is a phenomenon that I think is not observed on any other planet. Another reason why Earth is such a special place, one of many, many reasons. So occasionally, every now and again, when the sun and the moon are within a few, degrees of a nodal point, um, an eclipse happens, because it's going to appear, because they appear to be the same size, as if everything is covered. So now I want to just kind of break down a little bit some of the lore around eclipses, because obviously this one, I think, is being deemed the Great American Eclipse. And I thought the Great American Eclipse had happened back in 2017, but this one is even more um, potent. It's longer. The sun will appear to be eclipsed for nearly, I think it is 4 minutes exactly. Um, and Most of North America is going to see this. So the path of totality is right around kind of the center of America. I'm in Chicago. I'm actually pretty close to the path of totality. Um, it's about 90% um, totality where I am. Um, so this is a huge deal for, certainly for this hemisphere, but particularly America, because a good chunk of the country will be able to actually view this um, in its totality, which is really significant. So, you have people who are traveling from all over to try to look at this thing with their special glasses. And then you have other people saying, like, don't look at it at all. Like, it's a bad omen, like, it's evil. Um, and there's a few different schools of thought around it. So, actually, indigenous thought um, here, Native American thought, which is relevant because this is mostly happening here, um, was that it was an ominous thing. And this is because um, the sun represents all life. And so for the sun to be blocked out, that is obviously something that would be considered ominous or scary or likely to bring doom. Um, there wasn't necessarily an understanding for a long time across many cultures of why the sun was being blocked out, like what was causing that. So you could say, oh, well, now that we've, evolved our astronomical practices and we can really understand, the mechanics of an eclipse, maybe we shouldn't still have that same superstition. But honestly, one thing that many indigenous cultures and ancient societies were also very, very good at was tracking how certain occurrences in the sky aligned with happenings here on earth, as above, so below, right? That was a mindset that permeated throughout many, many cultures for a very, very long time. And as the world became more westernized and colonized, we became more out of tune with that. But thinking about that and thinking about what was observed, sometimes it would be, catastrophic events, things that affected important figures. So, depending on the time, it could have been royals or, the royal leaders of a country, those at the top of hierarchies, hierarchical figures, government figures. Something big or monumental could occur there. Um, so, we understand eclipses today from an astrological standpoint to be inherently unstable events and things that can cause a lot of instability and unpredictability. Now, that's not necessarily always going to equate to something negative, but I personally, because eclipses are so energetically intense and can be quite taxing, I personally try to take it very easy on all eclipses, especially one that's genuinely like total, like we're having this year. So I would personally recommend taking it easy, maybe meditating, taking a bath, cleaning your space, cleansing it, doing things that are low energy and restorative and restful. Eclipses are definitely not a time for trying to manifest, because it's just a very unstable energy and you might manifest something you didn't mean to. So if you're going to be engaged in ritual, I would say things that are about releasing, or, things again that are just kind of more reflective or meditative, rather than trying to bring things in. Now, this particular one will be tempting, to want to manifest or make a big change or have a big new start. And as I look at some of the astrology and break that down, we're going to see why, and why that can be maybe disillusioning, or something to be cautious about. Is this gusto of wanting to make something big and new happen? And besides the fact that eclipses are not necessarily the greatest energy for that, we'll see why this one can really bring some of that up for us, and why we should be mindful of that. So I also want to talk a little bit about the nodes themselves. So we've talked about just what they are, and how they're calculated, and what that is from an astronomical standpoint. But I do want to talk a little bit about the mythology a little bit, and I'm going to focus more. My style is tends to be a blend of many things. So I'm a tropical astrologer, but I will observe some Vedic or some Eastern techniques as they're applicable. And a lot of my nodal work leans more toward the Vedic understanding of the nodes, just because of the mythos of how the nodes came to be in origin, which maybe I'll break that down in another video, just like the whole mythology, the whole um, Vedic mythology around the nodes. But I am going to just talk about their significance more from that standpoint. And I think that'll also be helpful once we get into synthesizing the astrology and looking at the eclipse itself. Okay, so I figured I would just go ahead and pull up the chart as we get into some of the deeper, really spiritual understanding of how the nodes work. So earlier you heard me refer to the North Node as Rahu. And just so we're clear, that's this glyph here. Well, you can see because this is clearly where the eclipse is happening. So this kind of upward facing handlebar, I tend to call it. And obviously, since this is an axis, exactly opposite to that is going to be the South Node, or K2. Okay, so first we need to understand what the real purpose of the nodes are, because they're incredibly important. And when I'm doing even client work and talking to my clients, I tell them, the nodes are kind of the whole point. And the rest of the chart may or may not be in harmony with that. But I think if I can kind of break down what is actually happening on a deeper energetic level with the nodes, this will be clear what I'm saying and why I'm saying this. So the North Node is or Rahu, and Rahu is the dragon's head. Okay, and there's a whole deeper mythology around that I'm not going to break down in this video because I don't want this video to be super long. But Rahu, or the North Node, is where things come into material form, or where our desires accumulate and then project themselves as tangible material expression. So Rahu, in a lot of ways, is responsible for the way we're able to form material perception. Okay. Um, and this is also often referred to as Maya, the point of Maya, or the illusion of Maya, a concept that really is basically just explaining that all of the material world, to a large degree, is illusory, right? And so when we are focused on and obsessed with things on a North Node level, and the North Node creates obsession because it's where that desire is pulling us to have physical experiences, tangibly realized occurrences, right? So when we focus on that and when we obsess on that, it can be a destructive thing. This is where, materialism itself can occur, being overly preoccupied with the material realm and material things and material gratifications. The South Node is actually the opposite of this. So the South Node is, or K2, is where forms dissolve. So North Node is where forms actually come into materialization, or where we perceive things, where we perceive our desires to materialize, our desire for physical, physicalization of the spiritual. So coming into a body, being here, incarnating, having, kind of a northern pointing compass of like what you're constantly going toward, what you're obsessed with having experiences around in this lifetime. That's the North Node, right? K2 is the opposite. So that's where forms dissolve. That's where we rejoin the abyss, the spiritual realm, before things came into material play. I hope I'm explaining this well, because this is, kind of heady. And there's something more. So if the North Node is obsessive, the South Node is more compulsive, because there is a sense of familiarity there, because that's the realm where we came from, the realm where our consciousness was before it came into this realm, right? So just to break this down, materialization, obsession, and the kind of constant pull toward actualization is happening on the North Node, whereas the release and dissolution of form, and the potential draining of energy or release, is happening on the South Node, or K2. And this is also where we're going to be more compulsory rather than obsessive, okay? Because of the essence of familiarity that's happening there, on a non-physical level, right? So typically in Vedic astrology, well, both of them they're considered shadow planets, and they both have some difficulties and some dangers associated with them. However, the North Node is considered to be particularly destructive because of the nature of what it represents, which is materialism and the illusory nature of this physical realm, and how we can become obsessed with that, and how we can perceive things incorrectly on that north node level, right? So, and you see this when planets are touching the north node. So when, let's say you have in your birth chart Venus conjunct the north node, you might very well be obsessed with, money, um, having material things that are nice and refined, um, having property, attaining Venusian things. And there's an insatiable quality that happens on the North Node where it's like, no matter what you accomplish or what you accrue, it's still, I want more, I need more, I need more. This is when we're operating out of the lower vibration of how this works. Now, if you're operating out of the higher vibration, relationships and having good relational balance can be something important to you, or spreading beauty, harmony, creativity, art. These are things that can be the higher use of something like Venus conjunct the North Node. With Sun conjunct the North Node, which we have here, this can create a false self, an inflated sense of false self. So a very inflated ego. We can be really, really compelled to want to be famous or seen, or, needing that solar energy, which is what we are applauded for, needing to be amplified. And we pursue that and pursue that and pursue that, but we may not actually have a clear idea of who we are, what our identity is beyond that chase or beyond that pursuit. So this is something important to understand. Now on the opposite of that, something like this, just go with that same example, something like Sun conjunct the South Node, this can also create a difficulty for there to be an appropriate or a healthy expression of the ego identity in this physical realm. And there's a way in which we can have a hard time developing the self because of that that draining effect that can happen at the South Node. Now, the higher manifestation of this, or the higher use of this, would be developing a more spiritual identity. So developing a self that is connected to the true self, rather than the false self. So difficulties with both, but potential gifts with both, and when we see them aspected. So I really just wanted to break that down because I don't know, I feel like in Western astrology you hear like the South Node is what you're not doing anymore and the North Node is what you want to do in this lifetime, and that's like really reductive. And sometimes, you'll hear like, oh, the South Node is your past lives, and that's also like, how can all of your past lives be represented by just that? It's just, it doesn't really, it's a little overly reductionist and not really accurate. Some of the more Western takes on how the nodes work. Okay. So keeping all of that in mind, I know that's a lot, but I just felt like it was really important to at least have that understanding of the nodes. And with that, understanding why eclipses, why something like the sun and the moon are two luminaries, are two sources of light, being conjunct either nodal axis is a big deal when we're thinking about the larger effects that the nodes have on incarnation and soul development, right? So let's get into this eclipse now. So we have obviously the sun and the moon conjunct this north node in Aries. Now, this is significant for a lot of reasons. Obviously, Aries is the first sign in the zodiac. An Aries new moon would typically be associated with new beginnings, right? A new cycle, something, a new seed that we're planting that we then see in full bloom at the full moon until the cycle's complete and we start another cycle, right? We obviously just started the astrological new year not too long ago. So, an Aries new moon can be a great opportunity for wanting to embark upon a new project, or having that gusto, that kind of just that burst of energy to start things, or to embark on a new journey, right? The other significant thing about this is that um, people don't often talk about this, because we talk about dignity, like exaltation or fall, or domicile or detriment, right? But and the sun is exalted in Aries, meaning that sun, the expression of the sun really excels in the sign of Aries. But there are also degrees of exaltation, and the sun happens to be exalted at 19 degrees of Aries. So this is an exalted sun, and so an exalted new moon, right? Um, the other thing that is extremely significant about this, and if you know anything about me, if you're a client and you've worked with me, you know how important Chiron is to me. Not all astrologers work closely with Chiron or observe it. I actually don't even have any other asteroids on this chart, because I just wanted to focus on this. So Chiron is a part of this. Chiron's not only a part of this, but it is exactly conjunct this new moon. So sun is 19 degrees 24 minutes, moon is 19 degrees 24 minutes, Chiron is 19 degrees 24 minutes. That is huge. Now, Chiron is known as the wounded healer, and there's a whole mythos around Chiron. I will definitely do a video on Chiron, so that's going to be coming soon. I can't get into all the mythology in this video again, lest it be literally like 3 hours long. But Chiron tends to be the point where either in our chart or via transit or collectively we experience that core sensitive wound, right? And it can be known as the wound that never heals. It's not that it can't heal. It's just that it's always going to be the origin of, one of our kind of main or core insecurities that we live with. But this is also where we can find immense wisdom and some of our greatest gifts. One thing that I find with Chiron is that we tend to be able to do this or offer this healing or this wisdom or this insight initially for other people around whatever that archetype is, whatever the placement of Chiron is. But we really struggle to do this for ourselves. So, for instance, I'm of the Chiron and Leo generation, and I'm a musician. For those of you who don't know, I'm a singer, pianist, composer, many other things in the music industry. And for years, I've helped so many people launch projects. I've musically directed for other people. I've collaborated and featured and, been a part of these projects that went on to, launch things for other people and make them immensely successful. But when it comes to really prioritizing my art and my work, and I've always been a singer-songwriter, it was always the goal to be, a solo artist. It has been very difficult to not only pour into myself in that way, but to often feel like I'm adequately receiving the same energy or pouring into that I've given. So that's a sore spot. Plus, just insecurities around my own abilities, my own talent. No matter how much praise or how many awards or how many people have told me they love my music or they love my voice, it has always been and still continues to be difficult for me to 100% believe that I really am that great. This is like a really vulnerable thing for me to say. It's very appropriate for the energy of what this eclipse represents. So there's a core insecurity there around Leo things, self-expression, talent, creativity, right? And Chiron and Aries has a little bit of a similar energy because this also does have to do with the self. And this can, similar, yeah, Chiron and Leo and Aries do have a lot in common, actually. Similarly, this can connect us to inner child wounds, origin wounds, wounds that happen early in life, insecurities that formed early in life. The insecurity of identity in general, which can just be, I'm not secure in myself, or I don't feel secure in what my identity is. And especially with Aries, this being the first sign, that can be such a sore spot for Aries anyway, because there's such a desire and a will to express the self and do things and be a go-getter and be an innovator. But it's so early in the zodiac that a full egoic development or a full self understanding hasn't really had enough progression to fully develop. So these are all things that are on display, and these are all things that we're working with greatly. Now, I'm going to talk about this just irrespective of the eclipse factor for a second. If this was just a new moon in Aries conjunct Chiron, I would say, wow, this is an opportunity to really embark on new ways of healing, new modalities of healing. Maybe we're going to be able to really tackle something that has been a sore spot, or that we've been insecure about, or that we've been uncertain around, in a bold new way, have a fresh new start, healing something that's maybe been a chronic illness for a really, really long time, or a chronic problem, right? But the eclipse factor of this changes things a little bit. And that's because, one, the light of the sun is literally going to be covered by the moon. The sun will go dark. And again, thinking about that ancient concept, the sun being the bringer of life going dark, and the light being, gone from the world, albeit temporarily, is something that represents death, represents endings, represents loss. We could consider a solar eclipse to be a rebirth of the sun, actually really of the sun and the moon, because there's a way that the moon is going to be, greatly affected and re-energized by being that close to the sun, right? Or being, really encompassed in that ring of fire by the sun. So this is an energy that speaks to endings, and understanding how endings and new beginnings often overlap. So, you know, that impulse to be like, okay, this is where I'm going to do everything brand new. Well, there's things that need to end first, right? There's an overlapping of where endings and beginnings are happening. It's not that something new and exciting and renewing can't happen, but there is a processing and a closing of chapters that needs to happen first. And I touched on a little earlier in the year in an impromptu live I did on Instagram on how this year there's a lot of ways in which some false new starts or some false beginnings can occur. But this year is really supposed to actually be about closing out huge cycles in a big way, finishing chapters, closing out cycles within cycles that have maybe been going on for years. And that's because of the amount of changes we're getting next year. So Pluto will be 100% cemented in Aquarius next year, because it is dipping its toe in Capricorn again toward the end of the year. So next year will mark the first year that Pluto's in Aquarius all year long. Uranus is going to start to dip its toe into Gemini next year. Saturn and Neptune move into Aries together next year. The nodes change next year. There are so many great changes happening next year. So I feel like this eclipse is a bit of an energetic portal and a glimpse into understanding what are some of the things that we'll be able to probably bring into a new actualization when more of the energy is readily available and more aligned with that. But in the meantime, in order to understand how we're going to be able to embark on those new journeys, make those new plans of actions that we've been needing to do. There's a closing out that needs to occur first. So another way that I think this can be significant is understanding that, especially for those things that have been long existing or, happening for a long, long time, there may be a new approach that we have to an old thing in order to bring it to the finish line. Right. So being able to have this foresight is not necessarily easy because, again, of the natural impulsiveness and kind of young perspective that Aries energy has. So the restlessness, the want to just, I just want to start it already. I just want things to be new already will certainly be there. And this is also emphasized by the fact that this is an eclipse that is conjunct Rahu. It's conjunct the North Node. Now, what are the things I talked about with the North Node? It can create the desire for us to have more, to accumulate more, to go toward more. So, in a lot of ways, this can be channeled in a higher way where we're able to maybe have some great healing or great karmic release that we haven't been able to have in the past, by again tackling something or taking on something that's been going on for a long time, maybe in a new way or through a new lens. But also, we have to remember the potential illusory nature of Rahu, that something could come along and it could seem like, oh, this is my brand new start or this is my fresh opportunity. And it's not, it's just an illusion. So understanding that Rahu naturally distorts things and that eclipses are naturally unstable anyway means that we need to be really mindful and try to have a clear perception of how we're investing our energy, especially moving forward as it pertains to things that we're trying to change in our lives. Because I'm not saying that change can't happen. Change may actually be necessary, but it's a change that is more geared toward finishing things and closing things out rather than, just having your new life be here and this is how, it's gonna be from now on. There's a lot that we haven't processed. There's a lot of pain we haven't processed, considering Chiron's role here as well. So, I think this eclipse can be viewed as a beautiful opportunity to start to step through the portal of what that new energy will be, but understanding that we're not 100% there yet. This is also actually kind of echoed by the fact that Mars, which is dispositing not only this eclipse, but also Venus and Mercury. God, there's so many things in Aries. Although Mercury is retrograde. So again, that's also emphasizing the need to reflect or to look back. Even though we have this energy that is making us want to go towards something new and really, really pulling us to make maybe rash decisions or bold changes that completely disconnect us from our existing lives. Not only is the fact that this is Rahu eclipse, and so we need to be clear on if the decisions we're making are good or not. Mercury being retrograde, even though it's in Aries, is saying, what do I need to reconsider and what do I need to be sure I have lined up and in a row before I take those new steps, before I make those new decisions, before I change course. And then again, Mars, the dispositor or the ruler of all of this Aries energy, it's in Pisces, which is about endings. It's the last sign of the zodiac. So you have all of this new energy being ruled by or directly connected to an energy that has to do with the past. And it's Mars conjunct Saturn, which is not an easy energy. These are our two malefics meeting up, and they're meeting up in a sign that neither of them do like 100% great in. It's not that they're terrible in those signs, but they're certainly not necessarily the most obvious or the most clear to navigate when they're in the sign of Pisces. So having to confront obstacles of the past, having to really deal with, this Martian energy, which wants to look ahead and move forward, but this Saturnian energy that says, what are your responsibilities? What's the foundations you've already laid? What's the status quo as it is right now? And what of that needs to be released, and needs to be transformed, and needs to be healed, or needs to even perish in order for us to have this new beginning. So I spoke about a kind of sense of false reckoning that can be happening this year. April is full of that, and this eclipse is like the biggest marker of that. So just understanding that change is coming and change is imminent, but first we need to really wrap things up. Now, it would be remiss if I didn't also talk about this Jupiter Uranus conjunction that's coming closer and closer into perfection. It will be partile conjunct, actually aligned on the 20th of April. Between the 20th and the 21st is when we really, get that exact conjunction. And we're already seeing some of the ramifications of that in terms of increase in natural disasters, massive natural disasters. There was an earthquake in New York, which is rare. There was the horrible catastrophe in Taiwan. There will be more natural disasters. I've been talking about the uptick in climate crisis and ecosystem crisis and natural disasters ever since Uranus went into Taurus, and that was going to be one of the hugest things that we saw. And we've seen a lot of correlation, especially between when Uranus like goes retrograde and then when it stations direct, of seeing an uptick in this. But the Jupiter Uranus conjunction is really going to hammer that in, because Jupiter magnifies whatever it touches. Continued instability in markets, continued inflation. There might actually be a pop that occurs, where we could start to really see some economic collapse. Start to, I know that it's something that's already imminent for many of us, but it starts to become an unavoidable reality the closer that conjunction hits. But the other reason why I'm talking about it in this video about the eclipse is because it's another energy that speaks to unpredictability, speaks to the desire for radical change. So, we're kind of being pulled in two different directions at the same time. And I think, like I said, change is imminent. We're really in the thick of the biggest transformations of this decade starting to occur globally, within governmental powers. I know that across the board we've got, different dinos duking it out, but that's the old guard is only going to be able to last for so long, and they know that. Different ways of understanding community, especially as Pluto comes into Aquarius. Different revolutions occurring, different innovations occurring that will really see, oh my goodness, the technological advancements that are about to just kind of go through the roof once Uranus comes into Gemini with that Pluto in Aquarius is going to be unbelievable. So we're in the thick of it now, both the positives and obviously the destructiveness of the change. I talked about this in 2023, that now is going to be the time where things started to get really bizarre. Things will start to get more and more irrecognizable, more and more unbelievable. And I think this eclipse also is a portal for that will really, 2025 is the year where like things really jump off. A lot of that carries into 2026 as well. So there's a little bit of a 3-year stretch where things are intensely chaotic. And yeah, a lot of that has to do with destruction. A lot of that is necessary destruction. A lot of it is inhumane destruction, as we're seeing with the various genocides that have come more into collective consciousness in the past 6 months. And we're gonna, see more of a need to rally around that as a community too. So big shifts are happening. This eclipse marks an opening of how we really begin to step into those changes in a more cemented way. But I would just say be wary of false starts around this time, because there's a lot that we gotta sort out, both personally and collectively, before we can really start to move toward the new world and the new society that we all need. That's really inevitable and imminent. So I hope this video was informative. I know there was a lot to unpack. I wanted to keep it around an hour. I will, I think, do a video doing more of a deep dive on the nodes and the more of the Vedic and Eastern philosophy around that. And I definitely got to do a video talking about Chiron. I actually am pretty sure I'm going to do a Chiron series, talking about the different Chiron placements and why that's important. But yeah, I want everybody to have a safe eclipse. If you're going out there to watch it, that's your prerogative. But be mindful of the fact that, you know, being out and about and especially traveling amidst not just an eclipse, but a Mercury retrograde and a applying Jupiter Uranus conjunction is, you know, is just something that can create a little bit more chaos than usual. So there might be some more uptick in some accidents more than usual. So just be mindful of that. It is a pretty rare event, so I get it if you want to see it. And if you're like me and you're just going to chill and kind of rest and sleep a lot and take it easy, I've been sleeping so much the past week, just because of the intensity of the energy of it all and all of the things that I've been trying to process before I can really make some big changes in my life. So and understanding some new approaches I need to take in order to to finish out some things and close out some cycles in my life. So a lot of healing available to us during this time, a lot of triggering in order to get to the healing. This is a great time for reflection, for meditation, for prayer, for resting and detoxing and purging and trying to, you know, just kind of cleanse your energy. So yeah, I hope you all have a good eclipse, and I will be posting more consistently. That is definitely something that's a new tactic I'm taking for my pre-existing business, is that I'm going to be posting more often. People have been asking for it, and I'm really trying to build up my clientele as well. So if you like this video, share it, like, subscribe, and if you would like a reading with me, I have my website, Double Venus Astrology. You can book through there. I do all kinds of readings. I do birth chart readings, solar returns, transits, couples, you know, synastry, composite, all of that. So yeah, I really hope that you will continue to tune in as I post more, and that if you feel so inclined to book a reading with me as well, because I really want to get a more consistent, steady clientele this year. All right, y'all. Take it easy.